There's a particular kind of belief that operates without evidence, not the belief that arrives after proof has accumulated. That is not belief but conclusion, a reasonable response to available data. The belief that matters, the belief that changes things, arrives before the evidence exists and sustains itself through the long period when the evidence is not merely absent but actively contradictory. When every available signal says the thing being believed in is unlikely, insufficient, or not going to happen, and the believer continues anyway, not through delusion but through a knowledge so personal and so specific that it does not require external confirmation to remain alive. Amber Bublé possessed this kind of belief. She was not a music industry professional. She had no expertise in assessing commercial potential or predicting cultural trends. What she had was a mother's knowledge of her son, the kind that accumulates not through observation but through proximity, through the accumulated thousands of hours of simply being in the same space as another person and developing an understanding of what they are made of that no external assessment can replicate. What she understood about Michael, with the certainty that does not need to explain itself, was that the voice she heard coming from her son was not ordinary. That it carried something real, a warmth, a genuine feeling, music understood from the inside that the world would eventually need to hear. She believed this through the years when the industry did not agree, through the rejections and the modest fees and the half-empty venues and the polite dismissals from people with the authority to make things happen who had concluded, with the confidence of expertise, that what Michael offered was not what the market was asking for, and through all of those years, quietly and without telling him, she did something. Every time Michael performed in any venue, before any audience, at any stage of the career that was not yet the career it would become, Amber brought a cassette tape recorder. She pressed record. She kept the tapes. She built in labeled boxes in a closet in her home in Burnaby, a private archive of a voice the world had not yet decided to pay attention to. And then one day in the following decade, when Michael Bublé was one of the most successful recording artists in the world, she brought those boxes to him. And Michael, who any time he speaks of this moment always pauses, always without exception, found himself holding something that no Grammy Award, no platinum record, no sold-out arena could have given him. The house in Burnaby where Michael grew up was an ordinary house made extraordinary by the people inside it. Louis Bublé, Michael's father, was a salmon fisherman, a man who worked with his hands and understood the world in practical terms. He was not a man who spoke extensively about feelings. He was a man who showed up consistently and without drama, which is its own form of love and perhaps the most durable one. Amber held the household with the specific competence of someone who understood that stability was not a condition but a practice, maintained daily through attention and quiet refusal to let ordinary pressures accumulate into something damaging. Michael's relationship with his mother had, from early childhood, a quality that those who knew the family remarked upon. The voice, the love of the standards, the understanding of music as feeling rather than performance, all of that came through his grandfather Demetrio's patient instruction. But what came through Amber was something different and equally essential. The belief that what he was doing mattered, not abstract encouragement, but the specific, personal, unwavering form of someone who had watched him perform and understood, without needing the industry's confirmation, that what she was watching was real. She attended his performances the way parents attend the performances of children they believe in, not as a duty but as a privilege, with the focused attention of someone who knows they are watching something that deserves to be watched. She sat in the back of bars and in folding chairs at community events and in hotel ballroom seats at corporate functions where Michael was the entertainment nobody had specifically requested. She watched him perform for rooms that barely knew he was there, and she recorded everything. The recordings were not professional quality. They were made on a series of portable cassette recorders, pressed record at the beginning of each performance and stop at the end. Each tape was labeled in her own handwriting, the date, the venue, occasionally a note about something that had happened during the show. They were the recordings of a mother who believed before she had any reason to, and who wanted the evidence preserved. The earliest recordings dated from Michael's teenage years, performances at school events and community functions where the stakes were minimal and the voice was younger, less controlled. But even on those early tapes, through the hiss of a cassette recorder in the back of a room paying attention to other things, the essential quality was present, the warmth, the feeling for a lyric, the sense that the singer understood what the song was actually about and was communicating that understanding rather than performing it. The recordings moved through the years of struggle. The bar performances where Michael sang to rooms more interested in their drinks than their entertainment. The corporate events where the applause was polite and brief. The small clubs where the audience came and went. The cruise ship lounges. The regional venues, the talent competitions with their modest prizes. Amber was there when she could be and kept the boxes organized when she was not, making space for the tapes that would eventually be added, maintaining the archive with the patient care of someone who understands that what they are preserving has value that has not yet been recognized but will be. She did not tell Michael about the recordings. This is one of the aspects of the story that people find most striking, the sustained, deliberate silence of a mother who was building an archive of her son's career without his knowledge across years, out of conviction rather than instruction. It would have been easy to tell him, but Amber did not. The reasons can be inferred from those who knew her and from Michael's own account. The silence was protective rather than secretive. Michael was in the specific emotional position of someone who has committed completely to a pursuit that is not yet rewarding him, sustained by a conviction the world has not confirmed. Knowing that his mother was recording his performances would have introduced a consciousness of being observed, a modification to the quality of presence that made the performances worth recording in the first place. The recordings were pure in part because Michael did not know they were being made. The performances they captured were given without awareness of a permanent record, the specific quality of giving everything to a room because the room deserves everything, without the modification that knowing you are being preserved can introduce. Amber understood this in whatever way mothers understand things about their children that do not require articulation. She kept the secret and kept the recorder running and built the archive in silence, for a future she was certain about in a way that no one else in Michael's life at that time had quite the same certainty. The industry said no, the venues were half empty, the fees were modest, and in a closet in a house in Burnaby, Michael Bublé was filling labeled box after labeled box with cassette tapes, building an archive of a career the world had not yet agreed to validate, because she had already validated it herself, years before anyone else was ready to. When the debut album arrived in 2003 and the world gave Michael's voice the reception Amber had understood it deserved for years, she did not say "I told you so." She was not that kind of person. The world agreeing with her did not make her more right. It simply meant the world had caught up. Through the platinum albums and the Grammy Awards and the sold-out arenas that followed, the boxes sat in the closet, labeled in her handwriting, organized by year, the archive of the career before the career, kept for the right moment. She brought them to him in the middle of the following decade. She put the boxes in her car, drove to wherever Michael was, and handed them to him. Without extended ceremony, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows the value of what they are giving and does not need to elaborate, Michael's account of receiving them has been, in the various interviews where it has surfaced, consistently incomplete, not because he is unwilling to discuss it, but because the moment resists complete narration. He begins and then stops. He mentions it and then moves past it. The pause that accompanies any reference to this moment is not the pause of someone choosing words carefully. It is the pause of someone whose words have run out before the feeling has been adequately approached. What he has said amounts to this. He opened the first box and looked at the cassette tapes inside, labeled in his mother's handwriting, and understood what he was holding before he had listened to any of them. He understood it from the handwriting on the labels, from the dates, from the specific venues noted in his mother's careful script, venues he recognized because he had performed in them, rooms that existed in his memory as places where he had given everything to audiences that were not particularly interested in receiving it. He understood that someone had been there, that someone had pressed record. That the years he had spent alone in the effort, sustained by nothing except the internal conviction that what he was doing was worth doing, had not been as alone as they had felt. He sat with the boxes for a long time before he listened to anything. The knowledge that the recordings existed, that Amber had made them, had kept them, had brought them across the years to this moment, was the most important part, and it required time to be received properly. When he eventually listened, he heard himself across time in a way that is not ordinarily available to anyone. He heard the teenage voice, younger, rougher, reaching for something it had not yet fully arrived at, but reaching with a sincerity that subsequent polish had not diminished and subsequent success had not explained. He heard the progression, the gradual refinement of control, the deepening of emotional range, the specific ways in which each year of performance had added something to the instrument that the years before it had prepared. He heard the rooms, not the rooms themselves, but their acoustic presence, the ambient sound of spaces indifferent to what he was doing, the clink of glasses in bar recordings, the background conversation at corporate events that continued through ballads that deserved better attention. The occasional feedback squeal of a sound system that had not been properly configured, the specific sound quality of a cassette recorder positioned in the back of a room by a woman who was not a sound engineer, but was paying attention with the fullness that attention receives when it is driven by love rather than duty. He heard his mother in the recordings too, not her voice but her presence, the slight shift in ambient sound when she adjusted the recorder. The way each recording ended cleanly at the conclusion of each performance, the stop button pressed with the care of someone who had been paying close attention throughout and knew exactly when the thing she was preserving was complete. The tapes were not a gift in the conventional sense. They were something Amber had made because she believed in him, and because belief, when it is real, requires action, not the action of telling someone you believe in them. Which costs little but the action of bearing witness and preserving the evidence, which costs the sustained attention of years. The conversation that followed the handover is one Michael has not described in detail in any public forum. What he has said is that he could not find words adequate to the occasion, which is unusual for someone whose professional life is built on finding words for feelings other people cannot articulate. The person who made 20,000 strangers feel seen and heard in the course of a 2-hour concert was, in this particular moment, unable to say what he wanted to say to his mother. He has said that what he managed was insufficient, that the gap between what he felt and what he could produce in language was wider than he had expected. He has said that Amber received whatever he said with the matter-of-factness that characterized her relationship to her own acts of love, not dismissing it, not deflecting, but receiving it with the calm of someone who had not done what she did in order to be thanked and who was therefore not overwhelmed by the inadequacy of the thanks. She knew what the boxes meant. She did not need him to find the right words. He has said, "She just looked at me and said you were always going to get there. I just wanted to make sure someone was paying attention while you were on the way." And he thought, he has said, that the distance between those two things, between the certainty that he would arrive and the decision to pay attention while he was traveling, was the whole definition of what a mother was. Every artist who achieves the level of success Michael Bublé achieved is asked, at some point, to account for their persistence through the years before the success arrived. The answers usually describe passion, conviction, the inability to imagine doing anything else. These answers are true as far as they go, but they are incomplete. They describe the internal condition without accounting for the external conditions that made maintaining that internal condition possible. The external condition that made Michael Bublé's persistence possible was not only his grandfather's belief, though that was real and essential. It was not only his own conviction, though that was real and essential too. It was also his mother, sitting in the back of rooms that were not listening, pressing record, preserving a voice she had decided was worth preserving before anyone else had arrived at that conclusion. Her certainty was not the certainty of proof. It was the certainty of knowing, the specific, personal, unshakable knowledge of a mother who had listened to her son since before he understood what listening meant and had never once doubted what she was hearing. The cassette tapes that Amber recorded are, by any technical standard, poor quality recordings. The equipment was basic, the positioning was amateur, the acoustic conditions were often unfavorable. They would not be confused by anyone listening to them with professional recordings. What they are, by every standard that actually matters, is irreplaceable. They are the record of the years that made everything else possible, the years of singing into indifference, of giving full commitment to rooms that were not paying attention, of developing through sheer repetition the mastery that looked, when the world finally received it, like natural ease. They are the proof, preserved in Amber's handwriting on the labels of however many cassettes filled those boxes, that someone was watching during the years when the world had decided there was nothing worth watching. When Michael Bublé sings now in the arenas, to the 20,000 people who come specifically to hear him, The voice they receive is the voice that Amber kept in those cassette tapes through all the years when nobody was keeping it but her. It is the voice she pressed record for in the back of bars in Burnaby when the audience was indifferent. It is the voice she labeled and organized and stored with care, not because anyone asked her to, but because she knew its value long before the world did. The arenas are full because Amber Bublé was paying attention before full rooms were available. That is not a small thing. That is, in its quietest and most durable form, everything.